All right, good evening, Budget Committee members. Welcome to the ESPD and UMRD Budget Committee. So we'll do a quick roll call and then I will hand it over to Administrator Angie. So Dick Steinberg.
Yeah, I'm Dick Steinberg. I'm a first-year member of the committee, a retired civil engineer.
All right, Melissa Laird.
Yeah, hi, I'm here. Melissa Laird. This is my second term. I'm retired.
All right, Commissioner Fye.
Hi, I'm here, Commissioner for District 1.
All right, Commissioner Treese.
Good evening, Pam Treese, Commissioner for District 2.
Commissioner Willie.
Jerry Woolley, District 4, County Commissioner.
Chair Harrington.
I'm here, Catherine Harrington, Washington County Commission Chair.
All right, looks like we have Bruce Dickinson joining us via Zoom. Bruce, can you hear us as you transition over? We'll get him, and we're expecting Commissioner Rogers as well, but we do have a quorum, so over to you, Administrator Angie.
Good evening, Budget Committee. And I'd like to welcome you to tonight's Budget Committee meeting. I transmitted the full proposed budget message on the evening of May 8th, 2023. The message can be accessed on Washington County's YouTube channel. So I will not repeat that full message, but just for our Budget Committee members and members of the public, I would refer you to that YouTube channel for the full message. Tonight, you'll be hearing from the Enhanced Sheriff Patrol District and the Urban Road Maintenance District. The context for our full budget situation is available in the budget message and the trends and initiatives section of the budget, along with the corresponding information following that. As you will see tonight, staff has approached our budget process with a unifying view of our complicated organization. This approach that we call One Washington County supports teamwork and mutually beneficial systems that make our combined efforts greater than the sum of our parts. Tonight, you'll hear from our CFO, Greg Munn, Latricia Tillman, our Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer, our Sheriff's Office, including Sheriff Garrett, and our amazing land use and transportation team. I just want to note that I'm grateful for the hundreds of hours that staff time and care devoted to the construction of this year's proposed budget, supporting the board's principles and also that we are one Washington County organization serving the same community. Finally, I'd like to thank you, members of our Budget Committee, including our own Board of County Commissioners, for your service this year as we present this proposed budget to you and seek to answer your questions. Your role representing our community in this budget process is critical to our democratic system and principles. So thank you for your time and your energy and your commitment. And with that, I would like to turn the stage over to our language translation services, and just want to share appreciation both to our ASL as well as our Spanish interpreters. This increases access to our community members. First, you will hear instructions in English, and then the instructions in Spanish. Then the interpreter will transition to the Spanish channel, and there will be a long pause while the interpreter gives the same instructions on the Spanish channel. I will wait for the cue, and then we will proceed to the next portion of the slides. So I'll turn it over to our interpreter at this time.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. We have interpretation in Spanish and also sign language, but in order to join the interpretation in Spanish, there will be there will be a globe icon at the bottom of your screen with the legend interpretation. From there, you can select the English channel or the Spanish channel if you're joining us through a desktop computer or a laptop computer. If you're joining us through a mobile device, there will be 3 dots at the bottom right or upper right-hand side of your device. That's with the wording more. And from there, you can select language interpretation. If you prefer to hear the meeting in English, please select English, or if you prefer to hear the meeting in Spanish, please select Spanish. If you have any questions, please let us know by raising your virtual hand or writing it in the Q&A feature, and then we'll be doing our best to help you. Thank you and welcome. Muy bienvenidos a todos. Inglés y español estarán disponibles para esta reunión, así que si está utilizando la computadora de escritorio o portátil, haga clic en el icono de globo en la parte inferior derecha o en la parte donde dice interpretación. O si está utilizando un dispositivo móvil como un teléfono inteligente o tableta, van a ver 3 puntos con las palabras más en la parte inferior derecha o superior derecha de su pantalla. Y así de esa manera podrá seleccionar su idioma preferido. Si desea escuchar la reunión en inglés, seleccione inglés o prefiere español, presione español. Si tiene alguna pregunta, por favor levante su mano virtual en Zoom o use la función de QIA para que le podamos ayudar. Muchas gracias y muy bienvenidos. También tenemos las diapositivas disponibles. También tenemos las diapositivas disponibles en el sitio web del condado en español, en el cual usted puede seguir a medida que avancemos con las presentaciones. Also, there are slides available in Spanish, so you can follow along if you prefer to refer the information in Spanish as we proceed with the meeting. Thank you.
Quick question, Chair. Ms. Angie, do we need to remind all of our soon-to-come speakers to speak a little slowly to ensure that the translators have the time to catch up and translate?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for reminding all of our speakers of that. And at such points that I hear from our translator, I may ask you to slow down. Okay, translation is complete on the Spanish channel, and I will turn it over to our CFO, Greg Munn.
Okay, thank you, and Budget Committee, thank you for being here and spending your evening with us tonight. In terms of the agenda, just a few points we're going to go over. We'll start with welcome and introductions. That'll be the first part of tonight's meeting. And then we'll move into a couple of committee actions. That will be the election of the committee chair and the vice chair, and review of the budget hearing procedures, which are in front of you and were sent out to you ahead of the meeting. Then we will have presentations on the 2 service districts tonight, one being the Enhanced Sheriff's Patrol District and the other, the Urban Road Maintenance District, ESPD and URMD. There'll be an opportunity for public comment, and we'll talk about next steps and then adjourn the meeting. Okay, so in terms of introductions, I think we sort of did that already. Everybody had a chance to introduce themselves. We do have one of the Budget Committee members that just joined us online. Kevin?
Fernando, can you hear us? Fernando, are you able to unmute? Oh, we'll keep trying him on the back end.
Okay, thank you. And during the presentation, we'll have the opportunity for staff to introduce themselves and their supporting staff that are here tonight. All right, at this point, I'll turn it over to Melissa, who was last year's chair, to take us through the next steps, the nomination of the chair for this year and the vice chair for this year.
Okay, thank you, Greg, and welcome, everybody. It's good to be back doing more budget work. So we have to nominate the chair for this year. Do we have any nominations? We usually pick somebody from the lay people. So
I'd
the
like to
commissioners-
make a motion to appoint Melissa Laird as our chair for the second year in a row.
I second that.
A second. Okay. Any other nominations? No? Dick's looking at me like that. All right, the nominations are closed, and I will be honored to be chair again. And then I'd like to nominate a vice chair, and I'd like to nominate Dick to be vice chair for this committee. Anybody want to say? Yeah, okay. Any other nominations? All right, Dick, it's you and me.
Do we need to vote?
Do we vote? No. Acclamation. All right. Then reviewing the committee procedures.
Yeah, so the committee, I can review those real quick. The
Official.
committee procedures are in front of you. It's a two-page document that summarizes most of the information you need to know as a committee that was sent out to you last week. And at this point, if there's any questions about that, we can entertain that. But they're similar to what we've done in the past and are consistent with other budget committee processes.
Okay, are there any questions or comments on the committee procedures? Yeah, that was the the three-pager that you sent out today.
That's right.
So kind of went over the purpose and the guideline. So any questions on any of this? All right, sounds good. All right, then just overall guidelines for the community input. So the community input will occur toward the end of the meeting, so the public can hear and refer to the presentations and discussions. And so each public presentation can be 2 minutes for an individual or 5 minutes if they're speaking for an organization. So that will be at the end of each one of the division topics. So take good notes if you have some comments or questions at the end. And then with that, I'll turn over to Latricia Tillman to go over equity, diversity, and inclusion in the budget process.
Thank you, and good evening, Madam Chair and Budget Committee. My name is Latricia Tillman. I use she and her pronouns, and I'm your Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer. And I just want to begin with appreciation, first of all, for the Budget Committee direction in 2021 to build equity into our budget, and for staff within Washington County who took on that challenge and developed and launched this relatively new process. So we are in year 2 of the budget equity tool. And I just want to talk a little bit about why equity. So why is it important to consider equity in public budgeting? Our budget is a significant policy document adopted each year by the board. And in alignment with the county's equity resolution, the board has committed to providing leadership to make Washington County more equitable and inclusive to all marginalized groups, and to spending the public's dollars in a way that maximizes benefit for the entire county. Washington County is one of the most diverse counties in Oregon, both in terms of race, ethnicity, as well as language. 1 out of 3 Washington County residents identify as a race or ethnicity other than white. And approximately 93,000 Washington County residents speak a language other than English at home. And of those, 46,000 speak English less than very well, and about 8% of the population that speaks less than English less than very well, is over age 5. Again, we are not the most, but we are among the most linguistically diverse counties in Oregon. Additionally, 9%, or almost 1 out of 10 American Indian, Alaska Native households, and 9%, or 1 out of 10, of Black African American households in Washington County have an income less than $15,000 a year. This is twice the Washington County average across all races. So as I'm illustrating, what's really essential in thinking about equity is we need to invest in data-driven decision-making or data-informed decision-making, understanding what inequities exist and how our budget is intending to address those inequities. We focus on transparency, making it clear how we are allocating dollars, how we are communicating our expectation to advance equity through our budget. We focus on access, who has access to Washington County services, disaggregated by race, ethnicity, language, and other social factors. as well as quality, how our service delivery is meeting the unique cultural norms, values, and social positioning of diverse communities, and how our investments are transforming the environments that create and sustain inequity. Equity also requires an outcomes focus, so really understanding what is the return on the investment you are all making when we look at our data disaggregated by race and ethnicity. How do we actually know that our investments are making a difference and moving us toward equity in the outcomes you're investing in? Finally, the documents that show an analysis of the budget equity tool submissions are posted on Washington County's budget website, both for last year and this year. Next slide, please, whoever has the clicker. Thank you. So our budget equity tool evolved between last year's budget process and this year's budget process based on the feedback of staff. We are just leaning into being a learning organization. And as a result, we made slight shifts in the format of the budget equity tool questions to reflect this year's budget constraints and to distinguish between internally facing org units and externally facing organizational units. And like last year, we did not ask for budget equity tool submissions for organizational units that are pass-through dollars and that don't have personnel costs associated with them. So in terms of this year's budget equity tool, we did have two tools. The community-facing organizational units were asked to identify their civil rights investments, focus on language access and accommodations for people with disabilities. We asked for an understanding of data focused on known racial and ethnic inequities in access, quality, and outcomes of services. This year, for the first time, we asked for an understanding of investment in community engagement, focused on engaging communities most likely to be adversely impacted by a budget or program decision, and asked that they be involved in the actual consideration of budgeting. We asked that organizational units look at equitable services, so ensuring that diverse communities all can expect the highest possible level of access, quality, and outcomes of our county services, and to identify what the investments were in culturally specific services delivered by culturally specific organizations, which is one way to assure high quality access, services, and outcomes. And then finally, we asked for community-facing org units to identify how they are investing in equitable organizational development. So how can they invest in growing their internal knowledge of staff, their skills, ability, and capacity, all to lean in to supporting equity in our workflow and our outcomes. So these investments include things like workforce and leadership diversity, making sure we have a workforce that mirrors the communities we serve, equitable access to training, and other equity-focused professional services to help build best practices into all aspects of our work and our organization. For internally facing organizational units, we only ask that they focus on civil rights compliance and equitable organizational development. Next slide. So here are the initial results of the budget equity tool, and these are broader than the focus, I think, of this particular committee today. These numbers reflect the equity investments identified by departments across the entire county budget. They reflect base budget amounts in the fiscal year 2023-2024 budget prior to developing the 4%, 7%, and 10% cut scenarios. This number doesn't include investments in staff who spend all or part of their time focused on equity But we also know that personnel costs make a significant proportion of our budget. So we think this underreports our actual investment in equity. In terms of our equity-focused service delivery investment, the base budget amount before cuts was $4.8 million, which is a significant decrease from the proposed budget investment amounts in 2022 and 2023, primarily due to changes in ARPA allocations. Our community engagement investment is slightly more than $3 million. And this was the first time that we asked to identify the actual investment in community engagement, so we don't have a comparison to last year. This reflects our baseline data. Equitable organizational development investments, the base budget amount was almost $2 million, which also represents about a 43% decrease from proposed investments last year. And then finally, civil rights investments in interpretation, translation, and accommodations, that budget amount is slightly less than $500,000 or $500,000, which represents about a 40% decrease from proposed investments last year. What is encouraging is that the number of bilingual staff who are in bilingual required positions increased from 180.5 FTE in last fiscal year to 194 full-time equivalent staff. This represents staff who are in bilingual required positions, and we know that there are also staff in bilingual preferred positions, as well as staff who are bilingual who don't receive a bilingual pay differential. So that's encouraging progress. And again, because this is just the second year of using the budget equity tool, we began the budget equity tool during COVID with significant federal investments that are limited. It's very early to provide any kind of trend data, and it's also a couple of outlier years. So we can't really say that this is a trend, but it's two important data points for you all to be considering as you're considering our budget development. So thank you for your time, and happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Back is Greg.
Before we go further, could you check to see if we have Bruce or Fernando, since we can't see them?
So we do have, Bruce is by phone, so you will not see him. But Bruce, can you hear us by phone?
I can. Yes, I can hear you fine. Thank you.
Perfect. Fernando, are you able to unmute and hear us? He's still having difficulty with Fernando and, oh, there you go. Fernando, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I'm here.
Perfect. And then we have Commissioner Rogers should be joining shortly.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so while tonight's budget presentation focuses on 2 of the county's service districts, it's important to provide the Budget Committee with an overview of significant changes in how the county budgets and pays for its internal administrative overhead costs. This is a significant change from between the current fiscal year that we're in to the budget that you're considering here. These are costs that generally benefit all county functions, but not necessarily the public directly. Examples include finance, accounting and payroll, human resources, benefits, hiring, the board and the administrative office, county council, facilities and the physical buildings that we occupy, technology that provides computers and the network and internet backbone that allows us to efficiently and safely access information and data to do our work, and a communication system that allows us to efficiently connect with one another. The current fiscal '23 budget, the one we're in right now, budgets these internal services in the general fund and are funded by a cost allocation plan that charges departments outside the general fund those departments that exist in special funds. Departments in the general funds are not charged directly. The difference between the total cost of the internal services and the amount recouped from special funds is paid for by property tax revenue received in the general fund. So the graphic on the left demonstrates this, and it shows the general fund activities, the entire general fund activities inside of the blue circle, and with a subset of internal service functions in the white box. So you'll see the admin office, the board, county council, finance, and so forth. While special funds contribute to the overhead costs, that's the orange or pink salmon-colored circle with the arrow with dollars superimposed on it, contributes to the overhead costs to the internal service functions. None of the general fund departments are charged directly. The balance of costs not paid for by special funds is funded by general fund revenue. If you switch and focus on the circle to your right, in the FY24 budget, we're changing the way we account for and charge for internal service costs by moving the internal service functions out of the general fund, so you'll see the white box down below as opposed to being inside the general fund. To their own individual funds and charging general fund departments their share of costs consistent with how the special fund departments are charged. So that's represented by that second small little arrow with the dollar sign superimposed over it. This will increase budgets in the general fund departments, but will not have an impact on the general fund balance. This will also provide increased transparency in each of the separately funded indirect service functions and will fully cost the services provided by the functions in the general fund. Because ESPD and URMD budgets reside in special funds as service districts, there will be no impact as a result of this change, but there will be improved transparency for the service districts as each internal service function being charged to the service district's budgets will now show at the line item level and be trackable into the future. Any questions on this change between the two fiscal years?
Let's see, is my mic on? I guess so. Greg, could you comment a little bit about the methodology used for the allocation? Is it based on FTEs in each organization or their own budget size? Or how do you arrive at the allocation methodology?
Yeah, so that's a good question. We hire a separate software administrator to help us with this. We give them all of our costs for our internal services, and they work with us to help determine what those drivers are that are best used to allocate those costs to our direct service departments. So in some cases, it could be FTEs. In some cases, it could be size of budget. In some cases, for example, with IT, it could be number of computers. I know one of our cost drivers for our accounting departments is the number of journal entries we make. So sometimes it can get very granular. And it's quite an extensive process that we go through to actually allocate these costs. That's a good question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I guess I have the next slide as well. This is more of a, if you can focus on the graphic here to the right, what this shows is that the functions under each of the internal service functions that were in the general fund in Fund 100 in FY23 all have their own fund. So next year, or in this year's budget, if you're looking at internal services, you'll see the transition from Fund 100 in the current year to Fund, say, 514 for the Board of Commissioners or 528 for the county auditor. So they'll be straddling those two funds as we transition fully into that new accounting method.
Great, thank you. So up next is our first Budget Committee presentations for the Enhanced Sheriff's Patrol Division, ESPD, with Sheriff Pat Garrett and Under Sheriff John Cook.
Thank you, Chair Laird, committee members. I am Washington County Sheriff Pat Garrett, and I'm here tonight with Under Sheriff John Cook. We approach you as we approach our community with humility and respect. We recognize we have an enormously important service to provide. It takes significant funding to resource those services, and we have to get it right. And you have an equally important role tonight, and I know you feel the same way about your role. So I just wanted to honor both of our roles here tonight in public safety for the 218,000 residents of the Enhanced Sheriff's Patrol District, or ESPD. Slide, please. The district includes more densely populated urban areas that lie outside the cities and require more police services than our rural parts of our county. And it's been our honor to provide those services for more than 35 years. At the time of the formation of the Enhanced Sheriff's Patrol District, the county's Public Safety Review Committee determined that a service level of about 1 deputy per 1,000 was the minimum service level for the urban area. And historically, the board and this committee has authorized a service level supported by levy funding to the level of about 0.54 officers. That's ESPD levy funding per 1,000 residents. And just looking back to last year, it seems longer than that, but it was just last May of 2022. Voters approved a replacement levy to continue those services with a 67% yes vote. We're certainly grateful for voter support and for our Board of Commissioners' support to district services. Slide, please. Just a quick reminder, in whole or in part, the district is comprised of urban, unincorporated communities that are listed here on this slide. You'll recognize the kind of the shaded map on the right is Washington County, and then the small circular map with the yellow. The yellow is where the district is comprised. Again, about 218,000 residents. Slide, please. Law enforcement services across the Enhanced Sheriff's Patrol District are primarily supported by 3 funding sources, and they're stacked up for you on the left side of this bar chart. At the bottom, the general fund at about 0.36 deputies per 1,000, and then the public safety local option levy at about 0.18 deputies per 1,000. And then, of course, our Enhanced Sheriff's Patrol District levy at 0.54 deputies per 1,000 for a service level of about 1.08 in the urban unincorporated areas in the district. Urban areas, as we have said, require just a bit higher level of service due to the population density. And with current funding levels in this budget, the Enhanced Sheriff's Patrol District and the Public Safety Local Option Levy are funded to meet the service level metrics that are represented on this bar chart. However, as Assistant County Administrator Calvert stated at your meeting on May 8th, general fund constraints, which we recognize they are very present, leaves a gap of 7 certified deputy positions in the general fund. Accordingly, the general fund deputy per 1,000 is currently funded at about 0.33 officers per 1,000 instead of 0.36. That's the what results from having 7 fewer funded patrol deputies in the general fund. Slide, please. In the voters approved continuing levy services, what does that provide? It allows us, the staffing, to deliver services which include connecting people experiencing houselessness with community resources. It helps fund a public safety response to the increased overdoses and abuse of OxyContin, fentanyl, and other drugs in our community. In 2022, patrol deputies used naloxone on 55 individual calls to reverse the deadly effects of an opioid overdose. Levy Services fund advanced training in crisis intervention and de-escalation for deputies to use when working with individuals experiencing an emotional crisis or mental health crisis. It ensures a rapid response to 911 calls, about half the time of the national average. It funds police services across the district similar to neighboring cities, and supports our mental health response teams, which pairs a specially trained deputy with a master's level mental health clinician to respond to individuals in crisis, often diverting them from jail to the medical services. And it provides funds to investigate major crimes like homicide, assault, burglary. Child abuse, unfortunately, is a major crime which we receive reports on a daily basis, and we estimate in the district, in the ESPD in 2022, we received about 2,700 child abuse reports or reports of potential child abuse. That's 7 every day of the year. Slide, please. This graph represents the latest FBI's person crime rates for, beginning at the top, the United States, and in the red line, and then below that is the blue line, the state of Oregon. Below that is the 2 biggest cities in the county, that's Beaverton and Hillsborough. And then the bottom line is the Sheriff's Office crime reports of person crimes. The Sheriff's Office reports represent the unincorporated area. We can't slice out just the district. But what we know is about 83% of public demand calls coming to the Sheriff's Office in the unincorporated area are from the urban unincorporated area. So it's a reasonable approximation of the crime rate in ESPD. Note the person crime rate increase for the unincorporated area at the very bottom. 41%, that represents a 41% increase from 2020 to 2021. That's the latest FBI statistics. And in the previous year, we saw a 23% increase. And you might ask yourself, why? What's driving that? When we looked at the specific crime type that was the largest increase, we see it's aggravated assault. That's felony assault. Injury with a dangerous or deadly weapon, or serious physical injury with extreme indifference to human life, along those lines. We also know that our domestic violence reports are on the rise over this same time frame. Those rate increases are very concerning, of course, to us. It looks a little bit like the 2 largest cities and the unincorporated areas are kind of merging as we become one mobile metro area. It's important to just point out that SafeWise, a home safety and crime and safety trend monitoring company, publishes a list of the 20 safest cities in Oregon every year. And their 2023 list has 4 cities in Washington County that made the top 20 safest cities. And they are Sherwood, Forest Grove, Hillsborough, and Cornelius. Slide, please. When we consider property crimes, we see a similar trend, though.
Sheriff, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry to interrupt your thought process, but the cities that you listed is why Washington County is Oregon's safest major urban? Is that because of those cities' data?
It's thank you very much, Commissioner. that is a significant reason why when we look at the entire county and not just the unincorporated area or just a few cities, we are the safest, we have the lowest combined crime rate of the 5 most populated counties. And yes, ma'am, those safe cities are a significant reason why. Yep, thank you. When it comes to property crimes, the sheriff's office rates are noticeably lower than the comparative jurisdictions, less than half the national rate, a third of the rate of Oregon, about half the rate of the 2 largest cities. There's still a bit of an increase, as you can see, and it's just good context when we consider the services that we provide in the district. Slide, please. This slide is to just take a moment and explain the Enhanced Sheriff's Patrol District Fund structure. So Fund 210 houses the property tax revenue, has an operational and public outreach function that is found on page 304 of your proposed budget summary book. And just a note about the public outreach, it's 0.2%. It's a very, very small portion of this fund. And that leads us to Fund 182, which is the operating fund where patrol operations that support the district are executed. It's on page 116 of your proposed budget summary book. And these funds support the day-to-day operations of the district and include funding things like employee salaries, equipment, training, materials and services, and so on. Slide, please. The Sheriff's Office total, for some context, we just wanted to mention that our total budget request this year, all funds, is $170 million. This is a 22% increase over the last fiscal year request, this current fiscal year. And it's primarily due to what our Chief Financial Officer was describing earlier, the addition of the internal service funds charged to departments' general fund budgets. If we were to remove that, our request overall would be about 7.75%. So this pie chart shows the breakout of operational divisions of our budget across all funding sources. The 3 primary sources, general fund, public safety or local option levy, and the Enhanced Sheriff's Patrol District. In the pie chart, our 2 largest divisions, as you can see, are patrol and jail. The services portion includes records, training, evidence, civil, permits, and professional standards. Administration is executive staff and business operations. The other section includes forfeitures, grants and donations, and contracted services. Of all of our funds, about 41%, or $70 million, support patrol operations. And on the right side of the graph, you can see the breakout between the 3 funds that support patrol operations. District Patrol is the largest portion. Our request represents an 11% increase over last year's request, and we'll dive into those details next. Slide, please. This pie chart reflects the District Patrol budget, which is Fund 182, and the budget request is $37.8 million for the next fiscal year. Again, an increase of 11% over the current fiscal year. If we just take the individual components there on that pie chart, we start with personnel. Essentially 2/3 of our budget funds people. A 7% increase from last year's budget, and it supports 139.6 full-time employees. That's 118 police certified staff and 21.6 other professional staff. This budget includes the addition of 1 patrol deputy based on the estimated population increase. Next up, interdepartmental, 9.3% of our budget. Costs previously included the county cost allocation plan costs that are now allocated in materials and services. It's still included in the interdepartmental is the indirect costs for the Sheriff's Office administration. This category also includes $120,000 in IT services that come up, IT projects, that come up over the course of the year. So we have a fund to make those repairs and acquisitions. Next up, our materials and services portion, or 18.3% of our budget. If we didn't include the cost allocation plan, that would be up just 5%. So that's just noteworthy to mention. And that includes communication services, our defensive tools that our uniformed staff wear, training, service contracts, and other supplies and small tools, and some fleet costs. And then capital outlay at 2.2% supports the replacement of 11 patrol vehicles that have reached end of life. And then the section other at 3.3% is really our dispatch fees at 1.2 million. Budget, being responsible with our funds is incredibly important to us, and we are on track to return unspent funds this year of about 6.5%. We do have some vacancies. That has frankly helped us out a bit, but over the course of years, we spend what we have to do the mission and return to the fund to keep it healthy what we don't need. Slide, please. And over to Under Sheriff Cook.
Thank you, Sheriff. I'm going to talk a little bit about the operations in ESPD. We're all aware of the fentanyl crisis throughout the United States. Washington County is not immune from this epidemic. We see an increasing amount of fentanyl come into our community. The Westside Interagency Narcotics Team frequently has large seizures across our county. They generally focus on methamphetamines and fentanyl seizures. In 2021, we saw 58,000 pills were seized here from our team in Washington County. Jumping up to 2022, they seized over 750,000 pills of fentanyl. It's hard to tell how many lives were saved by these seizures, but it definitely was a huge impact to our community. This year alone, the team has already seized a lot of fentanyl. They had one large seizure of 150,000 pills and over 7 pounds of powdered fentanyl. That was in February. Turn around in March, they seized another 130,000 fentanyl pills. So those are all drugs that would be coming into our community and being used throughout the region. You can see a picture of our canine, Mondo, here. He was one of the first dogs in the Northwest that was trained to detect fentanyl. Him and his partner, Deputy Colburn, who happens to be funded out of ESPD, take a lot of precautions to make sure that everybody's safe. Not only the community, but also the dog and the handler as they go into these situations. The handler, yes, ma'am.
It's my understanding that Mondo is still very unique, that there are not very many dogs that are trained to do this currently. Is that correct?
That is correct. There's increasingly more and more. Currently, they've been getting certified out of the state of California, but the state of Oregon Canine Group is looking to start certifying more dogs in the state of Oregon.
I just wanted to highlight that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mondo and Deputy Colburn take extreme measures to make sure everybody's safe. Their training aides, they have some precautions to make sure that there's no fentanyl that could be exposed to other members in their training. Before they send Mondo into a vehicle or into a home, Deputy Colburn goes through and does a sweep to make sure there's no sharps or any exposed fentanyl before they send the dog in. Deputy Colburn also carries some injectable Narcan, and this is different than the Narcan that our deputies carry because he would be able to inject it right into Mondo if he were to get exposed to fentanyl. And it would get directly into a system, and then they could get him into care. This type of work takes advanced training. It takes very advanced skills to make sure that they're able to keep the community safe. Again, following the fentanyl example on how it impacts all of our organization throughout the Sheriff's Office, we'll talk about a couple of our services. Our drug recognition experts are deputies that seek out and investigate impaired drivers that are impaired by other substances other than alcohol. They're increasingly seeing, when they get toxicology results back from the crime lab, they're seeing fentanyl increasingly in a lot of those toxicology results. The sheriff mentioned our mental health response team. The mental health response team and their clinicians know that a lot of folks in mental health crisis often self-medicate, and so they need to be aware when they're going into these situations of potential fentanyl overdoses and issues. Our school resource officers all carry Narcan. They know that fentanyl is often laced on other drugs, and so kids in the schools could unsuspectingly ingest fentanyl, and so our deputies in the schools are prepared to help that if need be. When our deputies do seize fentanyl off the street, we have to process it into our property evidence. And so our property evidence professionals need to make sure that they have up-to-date PPE, protective equipment, as well as Narcan in our evidence collection facilities so they can make sure that they're all safe. Our deputies all in patrol carry Narcan. The sheriff had mentioned that in 2022, they deployed Narcan over 50 times. A lot of times our deputies, because they're roaming out in the community, they respond to folks in medical crisis prior to fire and ambulance services arriving. And so being the first responders, a lot of times in these public safety emergencies, they're able to deploy Narcan and save lives until the paramedics respond on scene. In addition, our community outreach team has been working with the Beaverton School District on our One Pill Can Kill campaign to make sure that we get that education out to family members and students to ensure their safety. Continuing on with community outreach, partnering with the community continues to be one of the primary goals for the Sheriff's Office. It's important for us to meet the community where they are and make sure that we're connected to various community groups, CPOs, HOAs, homeowner associations, and business groups. We receive community donations to help us with special events like Shop with a Cop and backpack events that allow us to provide services to families and kids that may not otherwise be able to receive some of those services. We also attend culturally specific events, such as the Refugee and Immigrant Resource Fair that was held at a local church. This allows us to connect with new members to our community, to really allow them to see us as partners, to help them and their families if they ever need anything. Lastly, we're on target this year to engage in over 300 community events. That's going to help us reach out to thousands of community members throughout Washington County, specifically in ESPD, to help us build those bonds, hear concerns that neighbors have, and know what's important to our community so we can adjust our services. Sheriff.
Thank you. I just want to take a moment and commend County Administrator Angie and her team for the way that they negotiated, the way they approached the general fund imbalance with departments and with our office, which you've heard a lot about and understand very, very in great detail. We understand that every county department and every sheriff's office, every office is going to experience cuts to get us where we need to be on the general fund side. It's just also worth mentioning the cuts aren't sustainable year to year when it comes to public safety. Successive annual cuts could jeopardize 24/7 in our rural communities, for example. And I know that the county administrator's office knows that. You know that. Our board of commissioners knows that. And that conversations are planned soon after this budget is passed about ways that we could work together to avert future cuts in out years. And I just appreciate that teamwork as well. And we'd love to answer any questions you have.
Are there any questions from the Budget Committee? Good. Oh, okay.
And just to note, we have Commissioner Rogers has joined us online for about the last 20 minutes as well. So over to you, Chair.
He's ready. Why don't we go with Commissioner Rogers first?
Oh. Commissioner Rogers, you have a question, comment?
A comment and a question. Looking, and I don't know, Pat, whether you as sheriff or Greg Munn is going to answer this, but it's a little confusing on page 304 in regard to what's proposed. The $48 million is this program description. I guess maybe that's something else, but your revenues are 33 million, your expenditures are 37, so you have about a $4 million issue. I don't know where beginning fund balance is in all this. I'm used to something that says, okay, here's my revenues, my beginning fund balance, here's my expenditures, and here's what I'm going to end up with. And if I'm reading how you laid this out, it appears that you're planning for a $15 million, I guess about a 33% of your operating is going to be in some kind of equity going forward. Sheriff, I'm not sure if you're the right one or whether I should be asking Greg. Where's the beginning fund balance in all of this?
how about we get back to you on that question? I don't have the details in front of me, but that should be an easy question to answer.
Okay, and again, it's on page, I got one more, but it's on page 304. It says by category, your total revenues are 33 million. It doesn't show any beginning fund balance, and it shows expenditure to 37 million, obviously 4 to the bad. And then it's showing some kind of contingency at 10 million bucks, and that's kind of how you're dealing with it. But and it appears that you're going to have $15 million of fund equity, and the flow is a little different. My other question, this is to you, Sheriff, and you and I have chatted about this before. I mean, we all understand safety, and we all understand that that's an important ingredient to any healthy community. Looking at your budget in the ESPD, and I think you've kind of alluded to that, that's not a sustainable kind of budgeting model for the future. You can't continue to take those kinds of over expenditures of revenue. I mean, you're going to burn down that, whatever your fund balance is, however this thing's reading, pretty quickly. So could you, just for my edification, maybe the rest of the budget committee, what are you projecting in 4.5 and 5.6? Is this sustainable at all?
Well, as to your first question, Commissioner, my apologies. I meant to have the book with me, and I don't. So we'll definitely get you a good answer here on your first question. To your second question, the fund, the ESPD Fund 210, that holds it's the non-operating fund that holds the property taxes that come in, every year. That is a fund that is going to meet the needs as it was designed and intended. It's the county level base, right? That all of us on the general fund side are coming to terms with. That our Greg Munn has described so eloquently the challenges to our general fund. That's the conversation to have after this budget cycle to determine how to mitigate that cut from happening that undermines kind of the county base, that supports the enhanced service patrol district staffing level of 0.54 deputies per thousand. Does that get at your question?
Not exactly, Sheriff. Just to follow up, and I'll let it go. But you're projecting revenues of 33 million. You're projecting expenditures of 37. I understand that in our budget page 304, which is the ESPD, or 210, you can't deficit spend $4 million and say, well, I don't think your labor costs are going down. I don't think your service level is going down. So something's got to give, and I'm trying to understand in a thoughtful manner what that's going to be, because the general fund for our normal operations, jail and all the rest of patrol is elsewhere. I'm just looking at the ESPD budget and saying, how is that going to work over any period of time? So that's really the question.
Our ending fund balance this year is projected to be over $2 million. We're not overspending. If that helps.
It doesn't, and I'll let it go. But you're clearly showing on page 304 that you have $37 million in expenditures and $33 million in revenue. So that would tell me there's a $4 million overspend, and that has to come out of contingency or ending fund balance. Something's not working for me there, and we'll take it offline because the numbers aren't making sense to me. So
I can jump in and answer that question. Okay, so Commissioner Rogers, if you look at the bottom of that column under the proposed FY23-24 column on page 304 at the very bottom, in the line item called Fund Equity, that's your beginning fund balance of $15,417,655. That plus the revenue of $33,226,234 equates to the total expenditure budget of $48.6 million. Of that $48.6 million, 10.7 is budgeted in contingency.
So again, I'm chewing on the bone, and I don't mean to bore everybody, but the 33 million, and again, I would look down at the $16.6 million ending fund balance on modified for 22-3, if that's it. And so you got about $49 million, almost $50 million. And you're going to burn about 37.9 under the subtotal, not counting the contingency. So if that's right, you're going to have about 12 million. It'll take you 2 or 3 years to burn that up if you continue at the current rate of taxes, less the expenditures. So that's my accountant brain looking at how it's going to work, but
Thanks.
I'll let it go and we can talk about it later.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner. I'll get with Greg and we'll get you a good answer. I appreciate you pointing that out.
Thank you.
So maybe to continue with that, can you just describe a little bit about contingency and what's in contingency and where that money comes from?
So contingency is a budgeted line item for, well, when you actually appropriate a budget, you appropriate based on what you know is going to occur in the next year. There is an allowance for contingency, which is an appropriated amount. The board appropriates it, but it's not for a specific purpose. It's for unknowns, for things that might happen during the year. And there's generally guidelines around how much you appropriate. There's percentages, or in the general fund, it's the number of months of property taxes. In some of our other funds, it might be 1 month worth of expenditures and so forth. But there's guidelines for how much you would set aside in that contingency in the budget so that you can fund things that come up during the year that are unexpected. It still takes board action to move those appropriations out of contingency into, say, personnel services or into materials and services. But it's just a transfer authority that the board gives to move the money. So it's not new appropriations, it's just a transfer of appropriations during the year.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Oh,
Yes.
Harrington.
I just wanted to ask, how has the Sheriff's Office Latino Advisory Committee helped you and your team?
Oh, thank you, Chair Harrington. They have been an enormous help from assisting us craft a body-worn camera policy to helping be a bit of a kind of an accountability check on our traffic stops that are analyzed by the Criminal Justice Commission. We provide that report to them, and they help us ask better questions of the Criminal Justice Commission and their analysis. And just this past two months ago, we had Criminal Justice Commission analysts at a meeting to help us best understand and our lay citizens understand that data. And as a result of that conversation, going back a couple of years, the commission has led a House bill that would establish a culturally specific driver's training for those Spanish speakers in our community, who our own data and the Justice Commission's analysis shows are in all likelihood driving at a higher rate of being unlicensed, but there's still socioeconomic barriers, right, to getting a license. So we're partnering with our Latino Advisory Commission to help on that front. And then we are getting in the community where our Latino members feel safe, whether that's the Hillsborough Senior Center, Centro, School District, Latino parents, and advertising through our networks and through the Latino networks. It's been a lot of wonderful work, and we're connecting better as a result. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
First of all, Sheriff, thank you very much for being here. And I just want to share with everybody one data point about the enhanced patrol district from a resident who lives in an enhanced patrol district. And from one data point, there have been at least 3 occasions in our neighborhood where we've had to tap into that resource, and the response has been perfect. It's been very rapid, and it's resolved the issue without any difficulty whatsoever for the rest of the neighbors. So one data point, just want to let you know it's been very effective for us.
Thank you for the feedback.
So now I have a question for you. If you had $2 million more to invest in the enhanced patrol district, where would you invest it?
Probably, without talking with my chief operations officer on my right, probably with engaging our folks in the community who are living outside, and to connect them to resources, treatment, address trauma. We just have some more work to do on that front, and we're working with county housing and doing the very best that we can. But I think there's some more work to do. What other thought would you have?
Sheriff, I would echo that. Our HOPE program, our House Outreach and program engagement is important to us to reach out to those community members. Our mental health response team continues to be successful. We could definitely use more resources there, not just for the sheriff's office, but for some of our other partners in those endeavors.
Very good.
Thank you for the question.
This one is perhaps for Greg. I'm looking also at page 304 that Commissioner Rogers was talking about. And he commented on the $4 million difference between the revenue and the expenditures. And so I looked down on the contingency line item, and I can see from the current year budget to the proposed budget a $4 million drop, which matches that difference. Can you comment about, is that, that's, according to the data here, that's a 28% reduction. And I read in the notes that that's a combination of bridging the gap between when the fiscal year ends and when the next tax revenue comes in. And then part of it is contingency, which Don Rumsfeld always called the unknown unknowns. So can you comment a little bit about those numbers and how they play together?
You're referring to the contingency amount, the drop from one year to the next year?
Right. It dropped from 14 million to about 10 million.
So generally, when a budget's put together, if we are 100% perfect on knowing ahead of time how much money we're going to bring in terms of revenue and how much we're going to spend in operating expenditures, then that contingency line becomes the ending fund balance in that year, which rolls forward to be the beginning fund balance in the next year. So it's hard to explain those data points without looking at more years, because we're only looking at 2 years of data. But I think the question that Commissioner Rogers was asking is about a burn rate. What's happening to that over time? And that's something that we'll look at and respond back to the Budget Committee.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other question? Commissioner Wiley.
Yeah, I just want to circle back to something Under Sheriff Cook said about the HOPE deputies. I think it's important that this committee realize that the funding for the HOPE deputy, the one we have currently, expires July 1, so we won't have that HOPE deputy. And this is at a time when we are looking at time, place, and manner regulations that's going to actually put more demand on that HOPE deputy. And if we do not have that, we're going to be pulling patrol deputies off patrol to handle any issues that we have with our camps or any other homeless situations. And so I'm hoping that we can find some other sources of revenue to not only maintain the one, but I think with our time, place, and manner coming, we need two. And I'd like to be able to look into that, how we could fund those two positions.
So was that funded out of the general fund last year, the HOPE deputy?
It was actually funded out of some ARPA funding
So
during the encampment program throughout COVID.
Oh, okay. And those COVID funds have expired. Got it.
There was a pilot program that we were partnering with Housing, Health and Human Services, Solid Waste, to make sure we were addressing some of the threats in the community.
Any other questions? Kevin, are there any questions from Fernando or Dick?
Bruce or Fernando, do you have any questions for the sheriff and undersheriff?
No, not at this time. Thank you.
Bruce? Does not look like it. Chair Laird.
Thank you very much. So with that, if I don't hear any other comments, I think we are done. Thank you so much for the presentation and all the work you guys do. It's awesome. And I think it's time for a quick break. Sound good?
Yes, and I've been asked to let everybody know that there's extra food up there.
Extra
Please
food.
partake.
Sounds good. There's extra foods up there. Please partake. That,
Wait, can I ask a question, Chair? Should we be checking for community input before we take our break?
oh,
For the agenda?
Yes, we can.
instead of at the end, we should do that now.
Yeah, because we're going to go to the UMRD, so this
Okay.
will be specific.
Thank you. Thank you for
So,
keeping the chair honest.
I did not see any members in the room sign up in the back. Would any members like to comment on the Sheriff's Patrol District? I'll let you just come forward or raise your hand to alert me. Not see anyone. Would any member viewing this meeting?
Yes.
Please, wait.
Come on up.
My name is Shirley Evers, and I hope that I can talk to them. What does it?
You need to speak into the mic so
Oh,
that
okay.
everyone who's attending by Zoom can hear.
Oh, sorry about that. My name is Shirley Evers, and I want to thank our, the deputies, the sheriff department, all the police for all the work they do. And I think their hands are tied sometimes helping the homeless, especially at the shelter when there's saying that the beds are supposed to be held for the county, even though there's nobody there. And I hope that there's a way to look at those, maybe ask the people that are there how they can help and see how we can move forward in helping the people and helping the officers, because because I was there in an incident when somebody came in and the officer brought the person in, but there was no beds. But there was availability because it said that they have to hold it for the county. They needed so many beds held, but they were empty. So I appreciate their service and, that they are there for helping us in doing what they're doing. And I'm hoping that by getting information from the people that are part of the shelter, that maybe it can be improved. So I'd like to see it forward. And I want to see the people at the shelter also participating and helping, getting themselves a better situation than just getting the services. So, and thank you for everything.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your comments. Daisy's a good dog.
Would any member viewing this meeting online via Zoom, which should provide public comment on the ESPD presentation budget? I'll give you just a moment to utilize the raise hand function. Not seeing any hands, Chair Laird.
All right. So with that, the public comments section is over, and I think we've now formally ended the Enhanced Sheriff Patrol District's presentation, and we're looking for a quick intermission. Is there a proposed time? 5 minutes? 5 minutes? 10 minutes? 10 minutes. Okay. How about 10 minutes? We'll be back then at 6:52. Thank you.
All right, welcome back, commissioners, and back to you, Chair Laird.
Thank you, Kevin. And up next is the Urban Road Maintenance District Budget Committee report with Todd Watkins and Sherry McFall. Gray. Sherry Gray, sorry.
Well, good evening, committee chair and others. I am Todd Watkins, and I manage the county's road operations division. And we actually are the ones who are in charge of delivering the work of the Urban Road Maintenance District, commonly referred to as URMD. With me tonight is Sherry McFall. Sherry Gray. Oh my gosh, I did it. Holy man. And she is the program manager for URMD, and she will lead tonight's presentation and will be available both for questions if any come up at the end.
Good evening, committee members. The URMD is a county service district within the unincorporated urban area of Washington County, created to provide road maintenance for roads and streets within its boundaries. This is the district's primary purpose. It has a large population, about 211,000 residents. This is higher than even Salem, with 164,000 residents. If incorporated, the URMD would be the second largest city in the state after Portland. URMD is funded by an assessment of 24.5 cents per thousand. As it is assessed only with district residents, the URMD fund is insulated and can only be spent on road services within the district. All work performed in URMD is done by contract or agreement. URMD doesn't hire staff or purchase equipment. Washington County services URMD roads through an intergovernmental agreement, and the 4 programs shown here on the right are the primary services provided. URMDAC, the Urban Road Maintenance Advisory Committee, is the public body that helps guide the programs we provide to URMD residents. It has a 10-member roster, 2 of which are on our committee tonight. Each member can serve up to 2 terms each and must live within the district. I serve as liaison to this body, URMDAC, and I am continually impressed by their commitment to the support of URMD residents and the prudent use of URMD funds. Slide, please. As stated in the last slide, road surface maintenance is URMD's primary purpose. The 2 major impacts on URMD streets and roads are weathering and utility cuts. We actively manage the road assets in the district, including pavement condition as a result of these major impacts. Once we've assessed the road conditions, we select maintenance techniques to address them. Excuse me, I should have gotten a glass of water before I came up here. I find myself stumbling over my words.
Here comes Kevin.
Oh, thank you so much.
And while it's our hero. And while it's coming, there's actually 3 members of URMDAC here.
Hello? How could I forget?
Oh, she meant voting members.
There we go, there we go. Boy, Todd.
Way to save, way to save.
Good rescue.
Road treatments are alternated each year for efficiency. Slurry seal in blue on 1 year and overlay in orange in the next year. This year, we're planning to do overlay for approximately 3 miles of urban locals and neighborhood routes. In 2022, we performed slurry seal for approximately 15.5 miles of urban locals and neighborhood routes. We calculate the effectiveness of our treatments using PCI, or Pavement Condition Index. It's the standard used to measure the condition of the road, with 100 being perfect. The photo on the right shows a fresh overlay treatment. With overlay, the PCI is reset to 100. This treatment can add 10 to 12 years to the life of a street. The photo on the left shows a slurry seal treatment. It consists of a thin coat of emulsion and aggregate. With slurry seal, 6 to 12 points are added to the street's PCI and 7 to 10 years are added to its life. Another service provided by EARMD is response to service requests. We receive calls and web form submissions from the public notifying us when something on EARMD streets needs attention. As we're still within fiscal year 23, the most recent full year of data we can look at is for FY22. You can see here the most frequent request we receive is for overgrown vegetation, by far. Our road crews respond to these requests as quickly and efficiently as possible. With the high volume of requests received, our target is 30 days to complete, depending on, of course, the type of request. In fiscal year 22, our average number of days to complete was only 10.1, a drop of 5.5 days from the prior year. Please. Neighborhood Streets Program, or NSP, is a small but popular EARMD program. It's offered to residents on eligible streets who are troubled by the speed and volume of traffic in their neighborhoods. Primary goals for NSP are to discourage undesirable driver behavior, improve multimodal safety, involve area residents in solving local traffic issues. The program works in 2 phases. Phase 1 is driver education and enforcement. We provide lawn signs, radar trailer placement, brush trims, and request speed enforcement from the sheriff's office. We also support residents with communication to their neighbors. Phase 2 is installation of physical traffic devices, such as permanent speed feedback signs, curb extensions, or speed cushions. We are currently reviewing ways to streamline this program to ease the process for neighborhoods seeking traffic calming solutions. The Pedestrian and Biking Improvement Program, or PBI, is an EARMD program that funds small-scale projects, including sidewalks, pathways, and bike lanes. PBI projects begin as requests received by community members. To be eligible, proposal must improve a specific pedestrian or biking safety concern, address a connectivity issue, be located within the EARMD, and not already be a proposal on the list, which you'd be surprised is not always easy to do. There are a lot of proposals on the list. Project recommendations are made by EARMDAC. The selection process occurs biennially in odd-numbered years and includes staff guidance, public comment, and members getting out to communities and visiting the improvement proposal sites. We are currently in a selection year. As I stated earlier, I serve as liaison for EARMDAC. I want to take this moment again to acknowledge their conscientiousness and commitment to recommending selections that are well received by residents and also cost-effective. The first 8 years of PBI projects completed at 98% of budget. Excluding alternate funding, total earned PBI spending through fiscal year 22 is $15.7 million. We are evaluating adjustments for this program to ensure road maintenance continues to be prioritized and funded appropriately. Finally, the budget summary. Revenue is on the left, expenditures are on the right. Indirect, admin, and miscellaneous costs for the PBI program and for ADA ramps are included within their respective amounts shown on this table. Indirect costs for all other programs combined is anticipated to be 4% as shown, an improvement from 5.8% in fiscal year 23. We practice good stewardship of EARMD funds and are building contingency at a steady pace, adding to it each year with a goal of $5 million for next year, which is approximately 30%. And that wraps up our report. What questions can Todd and I answer for you?
Is there any questions from the Budget Committee? Dick?
I have one.
Okay.
Could you speak to how equity plays out in the services of the URMD or in how you deliver the services?
Certainly, yes. There are a few different ways that equity is supported in the earned. Excuse me. Most visible, because it happens all over the district, is a robust replacement program for ADA ramps. Replacement is triggered by a certain type of road improvement, and there is 1.1 million budgeted for ADA ramps this year. Also, within the process for pedestrian and biking improvement, all proposals are assessed for a cumulative equity score. This score is comprised of a number of factors. I listed them here in case you asked a question, including safety, environment, population density, proximity to transit, proximity to schools, and density of historically underrepresented populations. ERMDAC considers these scores when selecting improvements for recommendation to the board. Finally, we are continuing to build a sidewalk repair grant program. This is intended to assist property owners who might be struggling to afford the cost of replacing or repairing sidewalks adjacent to their home. There is $200,000 budgeted for this program in FY24, and we expect it to come online later this year.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Rogers?
Thank you. For full disclosure, I'm in the ERMD as well as I am in the Enhanced Sheriff Patrol District, so I contribute to both of those levies. But mine goes back to the budget, and maybe Todd, you can tell me, but you're going to get about 5.9 million, and you're going to spend out about 12 million bucks. You're going to end the year with a couple of million because you're going to overexpend, as you know, about 7 million bucks out of that $9 million you're bringing forward. So for 24, 25, if that's the case, you're going to have to be cutting expenditures back to about $8 million. And then by the end of 24-5, if you burn at the same rate, you'll be at zero until you're back at about $6 million. So have you thought through what projects you're cutting? And as the ERMD, as a policy discussion, decided what they're going to do to obviously deal with this decline in revenue?
Yes, Commissioner, good question. The core mission of the district is for road maintenance, and so that will be our primary focus on making sure that we maintain the road conditions as well as we can. The pedestrian and biking improvements, they're great improvements and adds to the community. And we know we get a lot of great feedback from them. But if we need to scale back on our expenditures, it would most likely happen with the PBI, just because of where the focus needs to be as far as pavement condition. Sherry alluded to the ADA ramps, the curb ramp program. Those are mandated at the federal level, and so those will have to continue as well. So we will be focusing on those two things, road maintenance and pavement condition and the ADA ramps, and then other services will have to take a back seat.
Thank you, Todd. I just follow up by saying that would be a really good policy discussion on the ERMD, and I would hope that our board might take it up as well at some point, because if your projections continue at $6 million in revenue and you're only going to have $2 million in carryover in 24-5, and I know we're dealing with the 23-4, but I always like to look ahead. That means that you're going to have $8 million worth of expenditures that you're going to make, and you've been accustomed to 12, around 12 million bucks a year. The year after that, you're going to have to cut it back to 6. So I think people should go in there wide eyes, with wide eyes, and saying, what are we cutting? What are we going to have to do? Or what revenue are we going to get? And does that mean that there's going to be something that's going to be from some other source in the county. So I think it's a good policy discussion at some point.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you.
Could I ask for clarification?
Sure.
I was trying to understand the numbers that Commissioner Rogers was tapping into. And what I'm trying to figure out is on the Fund 214, where is this $4.7 million of contingency represented? Oh, there it is. So,
You're on page
Yeah.
305?
She's got it.
Yeah.
so that's where I'm struggling with the only $2 million that Commissioner Rogers was, perhaps I just don't understand what he was trying to get at, which is fine. I'll just leave it there. Thank you.
Can I respond to that real quickly? Because I don't know who to call chair. I'm used to my chair. We've got a budget chair too, but
We do.
yeah, if you go up to the total revenues under proposed, you're going to have $5.9 million. Contingency with that, that's funny money. So 5.9 down under subtotal under expenditures, you got what, 12 point, I had a little hard for me to read this time of night, 12.4 million.
4, yep.
Yep, see the 12.4?
Mhm.
So you got $12.4 million. So you're overspending this by about $6 million, a little more. You're using some contingency carryover. What they're saying is carryover funds of about 9 million. You see that under the modified, under what they say revenues and expenditures. This isn't laid out real clean to see it. So that over expenditure, almost 7 million off that 9 is bringing you over to 2. The important number is over in the right-hand column change, 2037. So if you got 2 million that's going into 24.5, and you're going to get another roughly 5.9 like we had up above, you're going to have about what, $8 million in my round numbers, but $8 million, and you've been used to spending 12. So that's a 4 million cut. And that would put you at 0. So when you go into 25, 6, you're only going to get to spend about $6 million. That's a half of what you're spending today. So there's going to be some substantial changes. So that's where I got my numbers.
Right, so the way that the project expenditures occur with the pedestrian and biking improvement projects is that there is a lag. These projects span more than one fiscal year, and so they get appropriated, and then we do carry them forward as needed for the design and the construction. So when we first started these projects, they were a maybe 1.5 year cycle, but now those are taking longer. And so that's where some of these numbers, the revenues in particular year may not match the expenditures, is because we're carrying that over from previous years.
And it's, as I understand it, Todd, it's the same methodology that we've been using year over year for multiple years. So the methodology hasn't changed, the numbers aren't running out.
No, correct.
I have a.
Okay.
Go ahead, Pam.
Commissioner Drees?
Thank you. My question is really a reflection of a constituent, Brandon Phillips, who has brought up the question about the surveying for the Neighborhood Streets program and whether or not that meets with our equity goals, whether or not it is appropriate. He had asked if we could make the approval of this budget contingent upon that, upon changing that. And I'm not comfortable with that, but I do want to make sure that we continue to look into the process for identifying support for projects and that 67% number. So I'm just registering that here as requested, but also I think we need to be looking at some of the impacts, the unintended consequences of that number.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you for bringing that up.
And agree.
Thanks.
So I had two things. First, just a clarifying question, be sure I understand. So the ERMD, PED, and bike improvement projects budget line item, the 8.5 million, which is almost half of the whole budget, that really represents expenditures, my understanding is, of projects that have already been approved and are in the pipeline.
That's correct.
Right. Okay. And so commitments have already been made to execute those projects approved by the board and so forth, right? I look at the chart on page 32 of our handout that shows miles treated for with overlays and slurry seals over the past 3 years. And there's a definite trend going downward. And so someone who's spent a career worrying about maintenance, I guess I'm curious to know if you had another $1 million, setting aside the bike ped issue for the moment, where would you invest it in next year's budget?
So the payment condition within ERMD, although it's in very good condition right now, it is on a downward slide. The pavement condition index, as Sherry mentioned, is our indicator of the overall network condition. And so if I had additional funds, then that would most likely go towards the pavement condition. Hooked to that would be the ADA ramps, since those are mandated as well. And those two are tied at the hip. So that's where we would focus our efforts.
Is there a deadline for the ADA ramps?
As soon as possible.
Okay, there's no federal drop dead date, I guess.
Well,
Or is
there are, yeah, the rules have been in place for quite some time.
Right.
And so we are doing our absolute best to get those built as quickly as possible. But it's not an inexpensive endeavor either, so we're balancing all the needs of the district at the same time, and those are right in the thick of it.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Wiley?
Yeah, just to follow up a little bit, so how many road miles do you have in this district?
438.
438 or maybe 458.
It's about 400.
I'm not going to hold you to
Okay, thanks. I should know, but it changes all the time. So.
Well, as long as you don't have to count Pam's roads around her house, because
That's right.
she doesn't have a vote, remember?
That's right.
So going back to what
Yes, she's got a lot of influence.
going back to what Dick was talking about, the difference between just doing the overlay and the slurry seal. So last year, our budget was $11 million, and we did a whole bunch of slurry seal. And then this year, our budget is $12 million, and we're not doing any slurry seal, but just a little bit of overlay. So is the cost differential on those two things that significant? It's like 5 to 1?
Right, they are. A slurry seal is a thin layer of emulsion and aggregate that goes down that basically just puts a seal coat on the road. Whereas the overlay, the paving overlay, is an actual 1.5 inches, 2 inches of asphalted concrete that goes down. So it is a they're two unique treatments. And it is substantially more expensive to overlay a road than it is to put a slurry seal down, which is why we get so many more miles out of the slurry seal. Additionally, when we slurry seal, that does not trigger the ADA requirements. When we pave a road, if there are ramps that are on that road, that does trigger the ADA requirements.
So you have to fix the ADA ramps as you
Correct.
put the overlay.
Yes, and then with that, we do just one contract per year based on the size of what our recent spending model has been, about $750,000 to $1 million of surface treatment per year. So we want to make sure we put enough towards that one contract that it makes it attractive to the contracting community. If we put out 2 small contracts, one of each, it may be harder to get folks to be interested, so we make it a bigger contract for folks.
Yeah.
And it makes it efficient for staff as well, too.
Yeah. All right, thank you. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any comments from Bruce or Fernando online? Kevin?
Bruce, Fernando, do you have any comments? Questions? Looks like we lost Fernando, but we still
no.
have Bruce. Bruce, can you hear us? unmuted.
Okay, well, we'll give them some time. I do have a question, and with regard to the expenses, there's 3 areas that had pretty dramatic increase from last year to this year. It's professional services, repair and maintenance services, and permits, licenses, and fees. So I was wondering if you could just explain a little bit about what's driving those 3
And I'm sorry,
increases.
what were the 3 again?
So they're professional services, repair and maintenance services, dash street, and permits, licensing, and fees. They're all showing dramatic increase of expenditure from last year to this year.
Yeah, I don't have that specific information in front of me, Melissa, but I can certainly get that and follow up with you on that.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. With that, then, we now go to the community input. Do we have anybody, Kevin, do you want to drive the community input?
Yes, thank you, Chair Laird. Would any member in the auditorium wish to provide comment on the UMRD budget presentation you just heard? Give you just a moment to raise your hand or come forward. Not seeing any in the room. Would any member watching this meeting online via Zoom wish to provide comment on the UMRD presentation as you have heard it? Give you just a moment to utilize the raise hand function. Not seeing any hands, Chair Laird.
Okay, thank you very much. And with that, we're complete with the presentation of Thank you so much for all that you guys do and the great presentation. Appreciate it. Thank you, Todd. Thank you, Sherry.
Thank you very much.
And our next meeting is on Wednesday, and
Our
everyone's
next meeting's on
welcome.
Wednesday, yes. Yeah. And in fact, one of the discussions that we'll be talking about is the bike and ped and, you know, how to move forward with that, looking at the budget and kind of reimagining kind of what that needs to look like, because our eyes are bigger than our stomach, and we have to kind of adjust that down. So that'll be a good discussion on Wednesday with the advisory committee, so thank you. Thanks all you do. All right, then with that, we're on to, unless there's any other comments, we're on to next steps. And so for us, that means we will meet again on May 30th at 5:30 to approve these 2 budgets. Am I correct, Greg Munn? All right. Is there anything that we need to do for the good of the order or on our way to May 31st? No? All right, well then with that, thank everybody so much for attending, and do I have to, I can just close, I can just adjourn. I can adjourn the meeting, and I can actually use the mallet that Kevin gave me. We are adjourned. Yay. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for coming, all you guys.